Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Boy Manning here, and welcome to a Monday edition of the Garden Report. 2 weeks from training camp. Celtics Media Days in 14 days. And we're going to start ramping up our preview coverage here. And who better to start it off than Noah Eagle, who's probably going to be calling a couple of Celtics games this year for NBC as they bring back their NBA coverage, man. Great to see you. Welcome back to the Garden Report. And it's been a minute, man. Happy to see you.
Yes, it has, Bobby. I appreciate you, man. Looking forward to what should be a fun season. I know a bit of an unknown for Celtics fans, but NBC will certainly be there because the Celtics are still the Celtics at the end of the day. And so we're excited to watch this 2025-26 edition of them, see what Joe Missoula can cook up on the sideline.
So they did get a decent number of national games. And as I look at it here, NBC is going to have 6 of them. And you got a couple ESPNs mixed in there, a ton of Prime. So NBA games going to be all over the place this season. But the Celtics, I was surprised. I think they were 3rd or 4th in national games last year, obviously coming off the championship. They didn't fall that far in terms of the number of national games this year, which I found interesting. And I guess, like you said, it's just general interest in the Celtics still being high.
Yeah, I think there's a combination of factors. I think, one, the Celtics are still the Celtics, and there's always going to be intrigue of that team and that franchise just because of the storied nature of what they bring, the fan base that travels with them no matter where they go. And they did just win the title 2 years ago. Even if it's not going to be the same team out on the court, they still have pieces of it, and they still have the aura that they carry from their championship that they won in 2024. And so I think all of that applies. And then the second part is the Eastern Conference is just so wide open. If there were 3 dominant Eastern Conference teams, 4 dominant Eastern Conference teams, then maybe you say, okay, we're just going to concentrate on those. But realistically, there's still so much up for grabs on that side of the country in the NBA that I think everybody feels like, okay, let's make sure that everybody gets seen. So Orlando feels like they have a chance. Detroit feels like they have a chance. Obviously, Cleveland had a great year last year. We know the Knicks are going to be right there. But even without Tyrese Halliburton, you've got to imagine Indiana is going to be interesting. And so they deserve to be spotlit. Atlanta is going to be interesting. So they deserve that spotlight. And I think the Celtics fall into that as well. And so I think you combine those 2 factors, and they're going to be prominently featured again.
So Lakers ended up leading everyone, of course, with
Really?
34. Tied with the Warriors and the Thunder, who are going to get 34 after the championship. Knicks up there as well. Rockets, Timberwolves got 28, 26 for the Nuggets. And then the Celtics came in at 25, which if we're going to stack up the teams in the NBA this year in terms of how they're going to finish, I don't think the Celtics are going to rise that high this year. But there's been, I've had a ton of people on this summer, talked to a million people. The predictions for them are all over the place. And you have a big number of people, I'd say the majority are like, okay, you still have Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Payton Pritchard. They're going to be fine. Good coach. They're probably going to take some step back without Jason Tatum for most, if not all of this year, but they'll be in the playoffs in the East, like you mentioned. And then there are a number of people, and I actually do find myself leaning in this direction a little bit where it's like, ooh, if, the depth's not great here. And if they have an injury or 2, like it could go south fast because there's just a lot of unproven talent on this team after the top 3 or 4. And they could end up in the play-in / out of the playoffs entirely if things go a certain way this year. And I think if they're fully healthy and everything goes right, they're probably in like 4, 5, 6 range here in the East. If, again, there's significant injury or, guys don't acclimate to their new roles well, this could be a team that is playing their way into the playoffs.
Sure. I think, we had talked about it a little bit, but the Celtics to me are the most wait and see team. And I think what I mean by that is they are going to wait and see how they are in December They'll take those first few months. They're going to go out and see what type of team they have. And just this is me as an outsider looking in. We know how savvy Brad is and how willing he is to make moves at the deadline, make moves in off seasons, and constantly just tweak the team. And if they're not what they want to be by the end of December, I could see him really, one, urging Joe to shut guys like Jaylen Brown down, and if there's a nagging injury or something, don't push it. Same with Derek White, same with a guy like Peyton Pritchard. And if let's say it's the end of December and they're sitting in a 9-10 spot in the Eastern Conference and there's no real momentum of what they've built through the season, I could see that him starting to try to, collect some assets or do anything else so that they do retool properly for when Tatum's healthy next season. But at the same time, if we get to the end of December and they're firmly in the 3rd or 4th spot in the Eastern Conference, I could also see Brad trying to rip and try to make another move to make them competitive for the rest of the season and make them feel like they have a legit chance to make a little bit noise and build momentum even just into next season with Jason coming back. So that's why I think there's such a dichotomy of how people feel about the team, because it really can go either way. A lot of it's going to depend on Brown being a leader, which we've seen him do in the past. It's going to depend on Peyton Pritchard continuing to be the guy he was the last couple of years, Derek White taking that step of really being a ball handler for this team. And then on top of that, is Anthony Simons going to play enough defense for you? Because we know he can score. Can he play enough defense for you to really feel like he's going to be a legitimate piece in a successful playoff team? Will Keita take the next step in his development, which is the expectation? Chris Boucher, I think, is actually an underrated addition for this team. Like, that's somebody
I think it changed a lot.
It does, because people haven't talked about him enough and what he's done in Toronto, because he kind of gets hidden a little bit there, or has throughout the course of his career. But he's incredibly versatile, and he fits exactly what Joe Missoula likes to do, both offensively and defensively. And defensively in particular, that's a huge get for them, just to have a piece that can switch 1 through 5. So it's going to be a lot of wait and see. Does Baylor Shireman take the next step in his development? Is Jordan Walsh finally ready to play real NBA minutes? Like, these are questions we can't answer yet. And so until I have the answer to those questions, I can't give you a legitimate feel of what the Celtics are going to be. Because if one of those young guys, I just think back to when I was with the Clippers, the year Kawhi tore his ACL and was out for the entire season. A guy like Terrence Mann, that was when he develops. And he wasn't a young guy. He was 25 at that point. But he turns into a real rotation piece that could be a legit contributor in the playoffs. Amir Coffey turns into a real rotation piece. And without Kawhi Leonard that whole season, when only just 30 games of Paul George, 31 to be exact, so they're missing their 2 stars essentially the whole year, they still won 42 games because those guys took the step. Ivica Zubac took his step. So if one of these guys does that in Boston, if Luka Garza comes in and somehow turns out to be a real deal star, we don't know yet. So I think they're just, there's too many unknowns for people to make accurate predictions about this team right now.
I was waiting to see what the deepest name on the roster you'd throw out there. I think Jordan Walsh qualifies in that little section right there. I think what's going to be interesting here is Jaylen more than anything else, and he's talked a ton. I'd say there's at least 3 interviews he's done where he's discussed sacrificing to win in Boston, trying to make it work with Jason Tatum, being capable of doing more if he had the opportunity. And he's gotten chances, right? Tatum goes down in the game 4 there against New York. He plays game 5. They win. He has maybe the best game of his career. And then in the game 6, I think he had like 7-8 turnovers, fouls out. You remember the game 7 against Miami too, where they were down 3-0, and real low moment in his career. But he's come so far as a playmaker. Has certainly cemented himself as, I'd say, one of the 15, 20, 25 best guys in this league, somewhere in that range. So now that he has the opportunity, and that's the thing in this league, like, opportunity is everything. You get the shots, you get the opportunities, you get to, play the role you want to. You can make yourself a different guy. And I think that's what everyone's going to be watching for with this team this year, is just how great can Brown become in the number 1 role for this team. Because if you think about it, I mean, other than that first year where he's on the bench mostly as a rookie, he's been alongside Tatum from day one, and Tatum has typically had a larger role in this offense on this team than he has. So the consistency is going to be the key, right? Can he do it every single night? Because he can do it for a night when he needs to, but for 70, 80 games, is he going to be one of the best players in the league this year? Because they're going to need him to be.
Yeah, look, that it ends up being a question so much over the course of guys' careers that they were the number 2 option in one place, and they feel like they deserve to be a number 1 option elsewhere. I mean, look, the Celtics got to experience it firsthand with Kyrie Irving, where he was the number 2 to LeBron. And to your point, early in his career, he got to be the number 1, but they weren't a good team. And so he becomes a number 1 option with elite talent around him in Boston, and they never quite got over the hump. And then, of course, he's been a number 2 to Kevin Durant, number 2 to Luka Doncic. And now in Dallas, who knows what he is, a number when he comes back. Is he a 1A to Anthony Davis? And
they're going to be fascinating.
They're a fascinating team. But it's just an example, right? Then you have other examples of a guy like James Harden, who's a number 3 in Oklahoma City, and nobody recognizes the sleeping giant that was right there in front of our eyes, and he goes to Houston and averages 35 points per game. So there's 2 schools of thought, and I think Jalen Williams would be a great example of one right now, where he's a perfect number 2 to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Chet Holmgren is a perfect number 3 for him, and they all fit together. But I'm sure there will come a day where Jalen Williams, because everybody's going to say, oh, he could never be a number 1. Well, now maybe he has a chance to prove it. And this is Jaylen Brown's time to do that. It's the number 1 storyline for this team. No question in my mind, because if he can take that step, I think you put it aptly. Top 20 player. In my mind, no question about that. He's a top 20 player in the NBA, but I think he benefits greatly from having Tatum there because there is so much attention on Jason. And so Jaylen can operate. And again, I'm just going to keep using analogies, but it's no different than in the NFL. I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, where you've got A.J. Brown on one side and Devontae Smith on another side, and they're both number 1 caliber receivers. But one of them has to be taken away by the top corner, which means the other one's got the second corner on them, and they can probably burn them a little bit more. So now Jaylen Brown's going to be number 1 on the scouting report. How does he handle that night in and night out? We've seen his leadership style over the course of the years, and we've seen what he's meant to this team over the course of the years. And let's not forget, this guy's a top 3 pick who's now, as mentioned, a legit all-star, bona fide star in the NBA. He's cleaned up so much of the deficiencies in his game over the course of his career. You mentioned the Game 7. Everyone wanted to get on him for the left-hand stuff. Came back and he was better. That was the biggest key for them, or one of the biggest keys getting to the title and winning the title next year. He was a better player the next year. He was a more efficient player. He was a better 3-point shooter. Like, all of that stuff added up for them in a major way. And so it's not as simple as, hey, is he just going to be better? It's just, can he handle the workload? Can he handle being number 1 on the scouting report every single game? Because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And we know Jason Tatum is up for that night in, night out. And even when he has a bad game, he comes right back and delivers. And by the way, even when Jason Tatum's not shooting the ball well, he keeps shooting. You're going to need that from Jaylen Brown. You're going to need him to shoot through those 3 for 18 nights, because they're going to exist. Not everybody is Kevin Durant and can shoot 50, 40, 90 every single season. He's an alien, So I think that's where we're at with Jaylen Brown, is can he do that night in and night out and have the short enough memory and the confidence in himself, his game, and his teammates to be the true number 1 on a team that's going to win 45 games. Still remains to be seen, because to your point, this is his first opportunity.
Yeah, and I think he'll bring a different style to that role. I think Tatum's more methodical, scans the defense, lines things up. They're a slower paced team with Tatum at the forefront, and they've been successful with that. But Brown wants to run. He wants to get out in transition. He wants to play in the open floor, and I think that's going to be fun to watch if they're in control. I mean, the big thing with this team is they've been number 1, number 2 at limiting turnovers over the last couple of years here. That's a big Missoula thing. So the way they balance playing faster, using some of the athleticism that they've picked up here this offseason, to me is going to be intriguing. And for Jaylen, I think the big thing is going to be just not trying to do too much, because there's still other guys he can defer to here for playmaking, for shooting. Certainly, there's still a lot of shooting here. For scoring, like, other guys can get it done here. And I think Derek White's presence is going a little under the radar, as important as he's been over the last couple of years here. I don't think people are giving him enough credit for how much he can score, do more when he gets the opportunity. And Peyton Pritchard's the big one to me. I have some confidence in Jaylen taking a leap here. I have a lot of confidence in Pritchard with 30 minutes a game, 35 minutes a game, starting maybe, being one of the biggest surprises in the league this year. He just won 6-man, right? But I could look up and see him having like, I've hesitated to throw this name out there because he reached such a high level. I mean, he was in the MVP conversation that year, but Isaiah Thomas, like he was in the 6-man role when he first got to Boston, playing well. The role continued to grow and grow and grow. And then you're looking up and he's scoring like close to 30 points a game. And you're like, where'd this come from? I don't know if Pritchard's going to get to that level, but I think he's going to have a monster year.
They need him to. And I think what he proved over the last really 2 years, because the run to the finals, he was great in kind of spot moments as well. To your point, the minutes weren't super high, but the minutes he got, he made the most of. I think last year just proved that he's not just, one of those guys that is just around. He's a guy. He's not the guy, but he's a guy. He's not just a random guy. I think there's delineations across the board. You can be random guy who's on the bench, which I think most people expected him to be because of how he looks, because how he walks into the gym. You can be a guy, which is you're helpful to the team, or you can be the guy, which is what we're talking about with Jaylen Brown. I think he clearly proved he's a guy, but now can he take a step to be closer to that guy? That's what they need from him. And I'm not sure, you guys would probably know a lot better than me because you see him day in and day out. But I think he also benefits, similar to what we talked about with Jaylen. Like you're playing with a top, arguably when healthy, top 5 player in the NBA.
A lot of open shots.
Right. Like you're getting, if you're on the floor with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, again, I'm going to use the wide receiver thing. Now you're getting the third corner. You're getting the slot corner, right? You're getting the nickel. Maybe you're getting a linebacker that you're faster than. That's a big deal. And so now you're moving up on the scouting report. And we saw this. I'm going to use Mikal Bridges as the example. We saw with Mikal Bridges in Brooklyn. Mikal Bridges in Phoenix, great, can be in the corner, spot up shooter. We saw even when he got his opportunity with a couple injuries, but, you're still maybe the number 2 guy. He's great. He can make something happen off the bounce. He was creative offensively. He had a little bit more of a bag than I think people gave him credit for. And then he goes to Brooklyn and he's the number 1 guy on the scouting report. And he is the guy that everyone's looking at to be, the initiator of the offense. Didn't work. And he couldn't do it. It was, the numbers, if you look at the numbers, points wise, probably similar to what you'd hope or expect. But man, his efficiency was way down. His leadership wasn't where it needed to be. He wasn't comfortable in the role. And he wasn't comfortable getting keyed in on at this level. And so he goes to the Knicks, and now you've got Jalen Brunson, you've got Karl-Anthony Towns, you've got OG Anunoby, you've got Josh Hart, you've got all these other guys, and he can just fade back into being where he's comfortable, which is a defensive guy, spot-up shot maker, just creative offensively, doing all the dirty work, things that had made him what he was in Phoenix and early as he got into Brooklyn before he had to really be the focal point. And that's where I'm curious with Peyton, can he take that next step? And so, as I said, you guys see it way more than I do. And so I would trust your opinion and your take on him much more than mine. I only get to see him once or twice a year up close in person, which makes a huge difference. I watch it on TV. Obviously, you see the dazzling ball handling ability, which he has, the shot making ability, the burst that I think people never gave him credit for. All that stuff is real. But it's different when you see it up close. And that's where I'm very curious this year. Can he overcome the much more attention that's going to be thrown his way?
Yeah. And I've been intrigued, just being around him every day, like you mentioned, at how much his voice has grown. I mean, he's a guy who I remember when we first started interviewing him, like the first year or two, he'd come over and like, we got to a point where we just weren't asking him questions because you knew he didn't want to talk. The interview would be like a minute long and you would just, send him on his way. And then after the Knicks series in the exit interviews, he had this big speech about how the Spurs, they weren't winning every single year during their dynasty. It was, a championship, and one year they didn't win, then a championship again, and saying, this isn't going to be a gap year. The last time he did an interview, and just building up expectations for themselves this year, even though a lot of people aren't going to have him. He wants this team to stay relevant. And I think this year, alongside Jaylen, he's probably going to be one of the lead voices on this team, which is unbelievable. Horford's out the door and Porzingis and all these different guys, Drew Holiday, who have been leaders on this team.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy demanded a trade in 2023 because he wasn't playing at all. And they hold on to him and ends up getting that role back the next year for the championship. But it's pretty winding journey he's had here in Boston, and I don't think many people expected the level he'd reach. I certainly didn't see this, even though he was a great college player and probably an underrated prospect coming out because he was a little bit older, but he's been awesome.
Yeah, we see it all the time with these older guys too, where they get undervalued. I'll use Terrence Mann again. Terrence Mann wasn't even initially invited to the combine coming out of Florida State. He held records across the board with the Seminole programs. And it took him balling out at the G League Elite Camp just to get the last invite to the combine. He goes to the combine, he plays well enough, and he's still the 48th pick. The same deal for Peyton Pritchard, because he was a starter as a freshman at Oregon, decided to stay 4 years, he's penalized for that. I think that's ridiculous. And of course, gets undervalued. It takes him a couple of years, but he finds his footing. But I think the point you made is a really important one. Comfort, you can't undersell how important being comfortable in a place is. And we saw that with it. He's comfortable now. I think he was trying to find that comfort of the first couple of years of his NBA career. And so if you're going into a season knowing what the team expects out of you, one, but two, knowing the team has your back, which is where he's at now, knowing that this team trusts him, that's a big deal for Peyton.
You know what I think people forget too with him is he was in that draft class that was in like November after COVID, no workouts, no off season really. Like it was the craziest class.
Well, no, he was doing workouts in the garage. What are you talking about?
In the garage with the ball, yeah. I was talking to a couple people about that this year. That's still such a big deal all these years later, that video. But Aaron Nesmith was there. Like that was their class that year. It was him and Aaron Nesmith. And, Nesmith had a similar journey, and he ended up having an all-time memorable playoff performance this last spring. And man, I was really rooting for him to win the championship more than anyone else in that series.
He's been awesome. And again, I think Indiana's in such a similar position because of the obvious parallels with the torn Achilles for their star players, but
almost the exact same. It's so fascinating in that like East hierarchy that we're talking about here.
Yeah, but like the thing is, I feel like it's similar where people are they're really undervaluing Indiana. They're undervaluing how good the Pacers are probably going to be, because I think, and people did this all last year. Look, losing Miles Turner is obviously a tough blow for them, but they still had so much depth. That's what got them to the NBA Finals last year, is the depth. Like, it wasn't just Tyrese Halliburton being special, and he had special moments, and obviously the clutch plays at the end of the games is what pushed them over the top. But think about, Pascal Siakam was monstrous during that playoff run.
And he's done it before, right? Like, we're saying, can Jaylen do it every day? Siakam's done it.
Exactly. Nembhard was awesome. Like, Nembhard has a chance, I think. That's the guy. As we're talking about Pritchard potentially taking the step in Boston, Nembhard potentially taking the step in Indiana is what I'm looking at with the Pacers, because we saw moments where he can take over games. Like he is capable of taking over games. They have enough there. And McConnell had an all-time awesome run through the finals. So I don't know. Both teams to me are so fascinating in the Eastern Conference. And again, I think the Eastern Conference overall is just fascinating because, sure, you look at Cleveland and you look at New York and you say they probably should be the teams at the end in the East. But at the end of the day, one injury for either of those teams, it completely changes the trajectory of what the conference looks like. And now you have Orlando and you have Detroit and you have all these teams that are young, Atlanta, expecting to take that step. But these are still two teams that, with the experiences that they have in the postseason, still left on their roster. And with the coaches that I think are huge advantages, essentially every time they walk out on the floor. We saw Carlisle last year finally get his deserved love. That's long overdue. And Joe Missoula getting his deserved love and extension and everything of that nature. I just think that it's still there for both of these teams. And then you see what happens through the rest of the season. So there are a lot of wait and sees. But, man, for both of them, I do think that they can have guys that come to the forefront as stars.
I want to take a quick second here to shout out our friends over at Prize Picks, and it is football season. It's fantasy football season, and depending on how your team's doing, I'm sure some people are having success, but a lot of people are feeling the injuries, the losses through 2 weeks. And what I love about Prize Picks is you can get started with a new team every single week. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Christian McCaffrey's one I'm loving right now. Even with the injury to start the year, he's been amazing. They put their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out. Even if your lineup isn't perfect, you can double your money. Even if one of your picks doesn't hit, and they offer injury reboots. So if one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks won't count it as a loss. And again, you get to build a new team every single week, which is the beauty of this. Learn as you go. If your full season fantasy team's in the toilet, this is the place to go. Go over to Prize Picks, try it out, download the app today, and use the code CLNS. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So we're talking Celtics storylines. We've hit on the obvious ones. Is there an underrated one here, under-discussed, maybe a player who's going under-discussed into the season that intrigues you with them?
Well, I think I mentioned the 2 young guys, and that's really where my head would probably go to first. Is you drafted Baylor Shireman at the end of the first round as a seasoned guy who played a lot of college basketball, and he just didn't get a ton of opportunity last year, which was to be expected with a team as deep and as veteran as the Celtics were. But now this is your chance. He's 24 years old. I think if he's going to be a legitimate NBA player, it's going to have to happen at some point through this season. Maybe not in the first half of the season, but by the end of this year, you're going to have to either feel that this guy is going to be a piece moving forward, or he's not going to be a piece moving forward. And the same could be said.
Are you high on him or lower on him?
You know, he played in the game against Brooklyn because that was just such a beatdown. And there's flashes. I think we saw last year that there are flashes. You know, they have his type of player on the team, but they could use the depth this year. And so I don't know if I'm high or low. I think I'm more curious because I think we did see some ability. And as mentioned, he played a lot of college basketball. He's not a guy that you're going to say needs the experience of playing, which is just such the case now with so many of these rookies because they're 19 years old and they haven't been in situations. He's been in situations and he's been a lead guy in situations. And so I think I'm just curious on him. How does he fit in? What do they see in him? What do they like about him? He's got good size. You know, he's got good length. So can he go out there and make some things happen? I think that's one guy I'm intrigued at. You know, we mentioned Boucher. How does he fit in? But I think the other one is Anthony Simons. And when I was with the Clippers, I saw a lot of Portland basketball, you know, for a couple of years. One, because you play them 3 to 4 times a year. And 2, because you're on the West Coast and those are the games that are on. And it's not 10 p.m. when it's starting out there. You know, it's 7 p.m. when it's starting out there. So you catch a lot of those Western Conference teams. I think actually being on the West Coast is the greatest thing for basketball fandom and NBA fandom because you watch everything. I never watched more NBA games than when I lived in LA because all of them are on at a time that I'm very much awake. And by the time they all end, it's still only 10 p.m. It's great. You know, that's
cool.
It's probably the best thing about living out there is the sports fandom. Monday night, Sunday night football ends and it's 8-something at night. You know, it's unbelievable. But the same principle applies. And so I watched a lot of Portland basketball over those 4 years I was out there. And there were so many moments where I'm like, God, Anthony Simons, man, this guy has a chance. He could be a star in this league if he just put it all
what stands
together.
out? Because I feel like a lot of fans in Boston haven't stayed up to watch the 10:30 Blazers games.
His first step is ridiculously quick. I mean, just explosive off the bounce. And I remember actually talking with the Blazer broadcasters my first year out there. And Neil O'Shea was the GM at the time before he kind of got run out of town for a lot of the abuse stuff. And you could go back and look at the reasons that he essentially got let go from his position. But Neil O'Shea was the GM at the time. He was the guy who drafted Anthony Simons. And this was the time when they had Simons and Damian Lillard and at this point still CJ McCollum. Like they had all those guys. And Neil said, Anthony Simons, just on pure raw talent and ability, is the most talented of all our guards. He said he's better. He has a chance to be a better player if he actually can put it all together than Damian Lillard. That's that's a lot to say for a guy who's not on the top 75 list. I never fully bought into that, but I did see where his vision was on just the talent ability of this guy. Shot creation's off the charts at his size. He can create space from the outside. He became an excellent shooter from three-point territory off the bounce when he was with the Blazers. And his explosiveness at his size always stuck out. He could get to the rim and finish on top of your head. He can go up and under. His body control was good enough that he could make it work. And when he was given the keys, he's putting up major numbers. Now, this is what we go back to in terms of saying, hey, opportunity to be the number one guy. He got that in Portland, but he proved that he's not good enough to be a number one guy on a winning team. That's the jurisdiction for me. Like Jalen Williams, we talked about. Maybe if he gets a chance to be a number one guy one day somewhere, he might be one of those guys that scores 25 a night on a team that wins 37 games, right, and misses the playoffs. Or maybe he's good enough to be a 25 a night guy on a team that wins 46 games and makes the playoffs every year. That's always the delineation between the two. And I mean, I think back to like Brook Lopez as growing up a Nets fan. He was always great. He's the all-time leading scorer in franchise history. But when he was their top option, for the most part, it wasn't good enough. You know, that you weren't going to rely on a 7-foot center scoring 22 a night and grabbing 8 rebounds to go and make the playoffs. They were anywhere from a 20-win team to a 35-win team, you know. And so that's where I think Simons was, where he could put up 20, 25 a night with ease, but it wasn't going to lead to wins. And so how can he slot in with this team? Because the talent is undeniable. 2 things that he needs to slot in. How can he slot in as your number 2, probably your number 2, maybe 3 scorer with this team, whether you want Derek White to be that guy, you want Simons, you want Pritchard, they have options. And then 2, what does he do defensively? And that was always my concern with him in Portland. And their defense struggled. When he was their top guy, they struggled. And they didn't have enough on the back line. And especially then you bring in Ayton and everything just kind of went haywire. Ironically, Portland obviously brings in Drew Holiday now. They have a chance to be one of the best defenses in the NBA this year. They have a chance to be suffocating defensively this year. It's going to be, honestly, one of the more interesting and fun teams to watch.
You got the Hanson Yang hype train, too, out there.
He's awesome. I saw Chauncey Billups at Vegas Summer League and asked him. He's like, dude, you have no idea how good this guy has a chance. he's awesome. And so
they're going to be fun.
They're going to be so much fun. Kamara, nobody talks about elite defender. They just have length now on the perimeter, on the interior. They're going to be fun. All that to say, just to put them to the side. The problem for Anthony out there was that he couldn't consistently defend on the perimeter. He couldn't consistently keep guys in front of him or defend without fouling. Now he's going to have support around him, especially in the starting 5. Let's say if he starts, and my assumption is more so that he would probably come off the bench and be your 6th man this year.
It's going to be the story of camp, I think, that trade. There's been a lot of debate among Celtics fans. It's gone both ways. And
I think he would flourish in that role, personally, because let's say you go Pritchard, White, Brown, Boucher, Cada. Let's say that's your starting 5. That's defensively really impressive because outside of Pritchard, everybody else can switch on pretty much everybody on the floor. And that's how Joe wants to play defensively. But now you bring in Simons off the bench, and then you've got to figure out who else you want to fill around. You know, Hauser's playing with him. That's where I think it can be interesting because you've got to keep enough defenders on the floor to try to mask some of those issues. And look, the Celtics have been so good over the last couple of years because defensively they could completely shut your water off, and then you're going to knock down 23s a night, and it's going to be absurd, right? And
they've been a great defense for a decade now, going back to the beginning of Brad's tenure. So how they maintain that's going to be a big deal.
But I mean, you brought up Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah was not a good defender, but they had enough in the 4 other guys around him that you could compensate. And so that's
Warford, Avery Bradley,
those guys were awesome. And so that's where with Simons, I think that they're going to have to be really intentional about who they put on the floor with him because he gives you so much offensively and he's going to be a spark. And I think they're going to love him at TD Garden. Like he's going to come off the bench potentially, or if he starts and he's going to have these personal 8-0 runs. Like that's what he's capable of constantly. But you need to surround him with enough defense that you can protect him and keep him on the floor for 30 plus minutes a night. Because if teams are going to attack him every time down the floor, and it's either going to get him in foul trouble or they're going to play him off the floor. And so that's where he's at, because I think that's the kind of turning point of this team if you can figure it out and keep them out there, I think they have a chance to be really solid.
Yeah, and that's going to be a difference. Every single guy they've put on the floor the last couple of years has been able to defend. Even going back to Marcus Smart and, the last couple of teams they've had, you didn't worry about that ever. Hiding guys, masking deficiencies. So that's another thing Joe's going to have to figure out here. And it's going to be an interesting year for Joe, too. You mentioned the extension. He's joked a bunch about the hand he's been dealt since becoming coach here with this roster and, being born on third base or however he described it. Like, it was just the golden opportunity of all golden opportunities. I mean, he almost started his career with Utah like Will Hardy did. If he won that interview process out there, and that would have been a whole different experience than what he dealt with here, which is winning a championship and being in the East Finals every year. So we're going to see this year, is he the kind of coach like Rick Carlisle, as you mentioned, who's raising expectations for a team that doesn't look that great on paper initially, or is he going to struggle with this year as much as anyone else does now that he has to deal with players who maybe aren't perfect or have deficiencies that he has to roll with? And development's a big deal this year too. And I think what went underrated with the regular season for him last year is that he gave the Sharmans of the world chances, Kada, different guys off this bench they experimented with. They played basically all the bigs together. There was a lot of stuff they did last year that was great experimenting that set them up for having options in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Then when they got to the playoffs, rotation got a little tight. Some guys got phased out. It was a typical coaching experience in that sense. So no Tatum. That's the first major thing he's going to have to figure out, life without Tatum. And then a bunch of pieces who, in some cases, haven't played much NBA basketball, period. And Cade is a guy who's played some, but a whole season starting at center, that's a different experience for him. Garza's mostly been in the G League. Simons has been great, but now a different role, not leading a team, but fitting in. There's so many questions here up and down this lineup, like who's playing between Minot and Jordan Walsh and some of the Shiremen off the bench. Like they're going to have to figure out a lot this training camp with not a new look team because the main pieces are still pretty similar, but a pretty high turnover team here in terms of all the changes.
And I think the other thing that we haven't talked about yet, and we'll just go under Joe as well. Under Joe, they won almost every night, right?
Yeah.
You were losing, let's say, 20 games a year. You're winning 60 games a year essentially over the last couple of years, and you could shoe them in most nights to win and win convincingly. So now, how do you handle it when you have a 3-4 game losing streak? Because it's going to happen for them. How do you handle that? Whether you're Joe, whether you're the team, these guys who have been here aren't used to that. They're not used to having it be a legitimate guess going into a game against a team that maybe isn't a legitimate competitor, a legitimate title hope team. They're not used to and I'm not going to just I'm just going to use a team that hasn't been good. I'm not saying this team's going to be bad necessarily, but like the Charlotte Hornets, right? The Hornets come in, although they've been tricky for most teams anyway. But Hornets come in, the expectation for the Celtics over the last couple of years is, well, you're going to beat them pretty handedly. It's just not going to be the expectation with any team this year. And so that's how do you handle that? Because that's just so different from what it's been for them.
I want to go through the opening schedule here because my sense, even before we got the schedule, was it's probably going to be tough to start the year. Guys in new roles, trying to figure out what they're doing. You mentioned the pressure that Jaylen and Pritchard are going to face from defenses. I think that's going to be a tough adjustment for everybody involved. And then you get the schedule, and it's Philadelphia opening night. Could be a tough team depending on who shows up. New York at the Garden, game 2. Detroit, who was just vicious competitively last year, like this super hard playing team. New Orleans fully healthy on the road. That's not easy despite the season they had. Cleveland, Philly again, Houston at home. Just this monstrous Houston defense that they've built there. None of those are gimmies. And then you get to Utah, who maybe is, or Washington. And then right after that, it's a 2-game trip to Orlando. So all those games last year you're looking at and saying, probably a win, maybe a tough game, but a win. I think almost, you mentioned it, every single game they go into this year is going to be, depending on who they have available, a battle.
When I think back to my time in LA and even doing games for the Nets, and I've always, I talked to my dad who's done games for that team for 30 years. Ironically, some of the best years, the most fun years, are the years that the expectation is nothing. And I'm not sure what the expectation in Boston is, but it certainly isn't go and win the title this year. You know what I mean? Like, I think the expectation is be competitive and win a number of games, but it's not go and win 55. It's, can you be a playoff team with this team? And sometimes those years are the best because you go into these games a little bit freer and not expecting. I think about how many times over the last couple of years, and it's probably bad with this team, bad example because they were so good, but how many times where maybe they lost a game they weren't supposed to lose and it felt like the world was going to end because they lost one game they weren't supposed to lose?
I think the title year they lost to the Lakers when James and Davis sat, and it was full freak out.
Yeah, everybody's probably losing their mind saying, okay, something's wrong with this team. No, you're allowed to lose a game. That's just the nature of the sport. These are pros going against pros. But I remember, the years where I was with the Clippers, that year without Kawhi and Paul George, they win 42 games, and every win felt like the biggest win ever. And every loss, it felt like, okay, we learned something because, they battled well in that loss. And we're going to feel that pretty early this season with the Celtics if it's that type of vibe of the season. And especially depends on, look, if Jaylen Brown goes down like Paul George went down, it completely changes what the expectation is for the rest of the team and the rest of the season. But I actually think that there's an argument to be made. You brought up that schedule, that they're going to just play freer because they aren't expected to win a number of those games other than maybe the Washington, the Utah. And ironically, I remember that Clipper season, those were the games they lose because there was the expectation that they were supposed to beat those teams. So that's why I bring up, how do you handle that? Because they haven't had to handle that. How do you handle hey, you're not expected to win this game, go and compete, or you are expected now to win this game, don't have it be a letdown for you? That's a huge question for this whole roster. This is a huge question for Joe and his staff because they just haven't been through it before.
Yeah, I think guys are going to have to make strides individually, and that's going to be the big deal. Like, Jaylen taking a step back in that bigger role would be disappointing. Not seeing development from the younger guys. Like, I think that's where you get into disappointing territory this year. But even with that, I mean, there are some fans who say, take a step back this year, go into the lottery, get a top pick, and then be right back with Tatum and Brown. I'm not in that group because I think every team that's tried to do that, it hasn't gone the way you think it would. Just with the lottery odds alone, you look at the three teams that were at the top of this fast draft, they did not go in the last year expecting to be in that position. So I don't think you can force that. If it goes that way and that's how it works out, great. This team's going to have to draft well anyway to reload this roster. But there is a contingent of Celtics fans who probably would be okay with a losing season, but that adds to the low bar. Like, if they're good this year, even good, not great, I think that will be a pleasant surprise for a lot of people, especially if there's guys like Simons, as you mentioned, Shireman, Walsh. If those guys are taking strides and there's excitement going into the following year because those guys become real players for you, in 2027, that's going to be the exciting part. But that's, there's no expectations this year. The battle for this team in the long term is going to be, how do you put a championship team around Tatum and Brown in 2027 when he's back? So we are going to get into the schedule right here and some of the games Noah could potentially be calling. And if you want to go to any of these games this year, the place to go is Gametime, and the Gametime app's one of my favorite experiences. Been using it even before we talked about them here on the network. And my favorite part of it, and I've said it a million times, is the panoramic views of your seat. You can see where you're sitting in the app before you buy. Noah, there's some funky spots at the Barclays Center.
Yes.
Especially when they had hockey there. I know that was a big complaint. So you want to see where you're sitting. You don't want to go to Fenway and be behind the pole. So you get your view of your seat in the app before you buy. Your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Snag new ticket deals before anyone finds out by following your favorite teams in the app. There's a lot of great experiences here in this app. And of course, they're covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the industry. They'll credit you 110% of the difference with the lowest price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Gametime. More great games coming up this weekend, including a home game for the Pats. Download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Big time for us with them. Go over there, show them we sent you with the code CLNS, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. As we get camp started here, support our coverage by supporting Gametime. Terms apply. CLNS, $20 off your first purchase over on Gametime. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Gametime app today. So we're going to get into the games you could potentially be calling. No, I don't think you have the full schedule of the games you're going to be calling yet. But as we look at the Celtics schedule here, and I'll pull it up on the screen, I think I said 6 NBC games, I want to say. The first one's going to be the Knicks game in Boston, I believe. The first one's Philadelphia. I believe one of the in-season tournament games.
Okay.
November 11th, 8 p.m. The big question there, obviously, is this an Embiid-George matchup? Are those guys healthy? Is this a power-packed Philly team? But regardless, Celtics going to see them 3 times in the opening month. Team that's probably going to be, if guys are in and out of the lineups, in the same general territory as Boston this season. Indiana, you mentioned. Milwaukee, I think, is in that area. Miami. Like, there's this sandwich of 5 teams in the middle of the East. They're just going to be battling to stay above that play-in line.
Yeah, Philadelphia's. I'm really interested in them because obviously it all comes down to the health of Joel Embiid, and the reports have not necessarily been super positive about what he's going to be and if he's ever going to return to his form. But obviously, if he gets even close to that, I think we know how good Tyrese Maxey is now, and people almost forget about him because of what happened last year. That dude's a stud. He's a bona fide all-star, clear-cut, can lead you, can be a legit driving force of a winning team. We saw that in the playoffs 2 years ago. Paul George, he's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder. Now, is he physically capable of doing it at this point? Is he physically capable of getting through a season at this point? Big ifs for them. But if it all comes together, and I just judge the team based on what they are on paper, there's no reason they actually can't compete with everybody in the Eastern Conference if everything is in place as what they hope it would be, right? If their roster on paper is what it could be, if it lives up to it, and now you've got a top 3 pick coming in this year that they seem to love. You've got Jared McCain that people also forget was on track to potentially win Rookie of the Year last year. Yep. And of course gets hurt. They're interesting, but there's so many ifs. So I can't put any real stock into what they're going to be until I see it on the court. And it might work out, it might not work out, but time will tell.
Knicks on December 2nd, the rematch of the playoff series there, which I still can't believe Celtics blew those first 2 games in Boston.
Yeah.
I have them as the favorite in the East, tentatively early.
Okay. I understand why. Obviously, you bring a lot back. We're gonna see what it looks like under Mike Brown as opposed to Tom Thibodeau, and I do think that's a big deal because Tibbs was the Knicks. You know, it was exactly what they wanted it to be, and it was highly successful between that marriage over the last whatever it was 5-6 years. With that being said, Cleveland. I completely get why the Knicks would be the favorite in the Eastern Conference. At the same time, I think we need to give Cleveland some love and some deserved recognition. They've retooled their team. A lot of it is going to fall on the shoulders of, can Garland be healthy and can Lonzo Ball now be healthy for them?
Yep.
But if they are, I think coaching-wise, Kenny Atkinson is
he was outstanding last year.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's an elite coach. He's an elite developer of talent. And Donovan Mitchell, at some point, it's going to have to happen. And he's super motivated. Now, he's another one that I'm not sure it's proven now through his career. Can he stay healthy through a playoff run? Forget the regular season, through a playoff run. But at the end of the day, the New York Knicks, we saw them do it last year. They were a couple bounces realistically away from going to the NBA Finals. Indiana is not what they were last year without Halliburton. Obviously, the Celtics aren't what they were last year without Tatum. So the Knicks probably are looking in the mirror right now and saying, why not us? This is as great a time as any to strike. And I'm really, really interested to see what type of start they get off to this season, because I think that'll also tell the Mike Brown vibes. And we saw what he did in year 1 in Sacramento. It fell off after that, but that first year was magical, light the beam. So we'll see if the Knicks can take from that and make it their own.
Some nice depth infusions too. Jordan Clarkson, Gershon Yabusele. They picked up Malcolm Brogdon this week. So like what they're doing.
Yabu in particular. Like Clarkson, obviously, it's a great scorer off the bench. I'm curious, though, how he fits into what they do. And what they do will probably be different than what they did under Tibbs. But Yabu is really big for them. He fits kind of their culture, fits what they like to do on both ends of the floor. He's got some fellow Frenchmen on the team, so that always helps.
Detroit, they'll be part of the big MLK Day lineup for the NBA. Dallas is going to be a big one, though.
Yeah.
Cooper Flag. Is Kyrie back on the third? Davis, first full season there. I'm high on that group. The defensive potential they have is sky high. The Luka thing is just going to hang over their head forever and put a bad vibe around this group. And there are injury concerns here, trying to figure out what they're going to do with this roster, the backcourt in particular. But when they're full, if they get to that point this year, and who knows what Kyrie's timeline is, this team is in the finals mix to me. I even like them more than the Lakers, who have gotten a lot of love for the Luka trade here. Not to say the trade was great or excusable or anything like that. But
in the short term, I'm with you that Dallas has a better roster to compete right now for a title than the Lakers do. The Lakers still have a lot of holes in their roster. Now, they could fill them by the end of the season to enough that Luka's so great and LeBron can still give you spurts we saw in the Olympics. LeBron can still give you enough spurts that if you get into a playoff series, he can help you win at the highest level. But to me, I just pulled up the Mavs depth chart right now to make sure I'm not missing anybody. So when Kyrie comes back, you've got Clay, who still played pretty well last year, by the way.
Yep, he had moments.
Flag, Davis, Lively, and Gafford. Like that front line is just going to be monstrous. I don't know how anybody scores on the interior against them if they're healthy, if Davis is on the floor. PJ Washington coming off the bench. Najee Marshall had a really good year last year.
He did.
I mean, again, we talk about opportunity. He made the most of it. I think Max Christie's another one who flies under the radar. He played well for Dallas after the trade. He was
excellent, yeah.
LA. The Kyrie, the non-Kyrie games are where I'm curious, because D'Angelo Russell gets in there as like the kind of placeholder, and we've seen him in previous stops.
Yeah,
he's had moments. Look, you go back to Brooklyn when he was the number one guy, but the first go around in Brooklyn when he was an all-star, he was awesome. He was awesome. It was his team, but again, Kenny Atkinson, elite coach, put him in the right places to be successful. He had the right pieces around him. He had young developing guys. Dinwiddie was good for him. Joe Harris was good for him. Karis LeVert was good for him. Jared Allen. That was like, and then he had the perfect vets. And I think that's the one thing that people always forget this, to me. The young teams that take the biggest steps to me are the ones that bring in the right veteran players. And that Nets team is the best, to me, at least the best example of it, where they brought in Ed Davis, they brought in Jared Dudley, and they brought in Damari Carroll. Two of those three guys are now coaches, legit is in the NBA. Those three guys are the reason that D'Angelo Russell had success that year as a young guy. They taught him how to properly be a pro and kept eyes on him at all times. In Dallas, Anthony Davis is still your star player as your vet, so to speak. I mean, do you like Dwight Powell? Is he a vet, I guess, for them? Like, they don't have, to me, and I think the NBA has lost that art form of the veteran helping your guys stay on track. And I'm not sure who Dallas has in that respect. Is Jared Dudley still there as an assistant? Do you know?
He went to Denver.
He went to Denver. Okay, so you lose Jared Dudley. Jason Kidd has so much.
That whole staff kind of flew out the door, and there was some uncertainty with Kidd's future there as well.
Yeah, Sean Sweeney's gone as well. That's 100% a valid point. And so how does that look for them? I just think their ceiling is crazy high, but their floor isn't as high as maybe some of the other teams because of all the things that could go wrong in Dallas. So by February, we're really going to have a sense of them. We're also going to know how good Flag is. You know, we expect
they're putting a lot on his plate too. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, especially without Kyrie. When Kyrie comes back, it'll be a little different for him, and he can play the way he likes to play, which is just high energy, motor, nonstop, run the floor, always be in the right spot, elite defensively, all of that stuff. But before that, to your point, he's going to have to be an initiator for them. And so for a rookie, a teenager, as good as he is and as great as we expect him to be, that's still a lot. So by February, we're going to have a sense of what they're going to be, which is going to be a fun matchup in Dallas.
For sure. And he's going to come back to Boston, which is pretty hyped up, in March. The Lakers, they're always fun. Luka just had a extraordinary Eurobasket. Minnesota, they will be fun as well with Anthony Edwards and trying to put together a West Conference Finals season again. So that's the NBC slate there, and I'm excited to follow along with your coverage this year. And hopefully you'll be able to make it out to Boston for a game or two. Looked like mostly road games there. But what are you looking forward to most this year as you guys get going? Like, there's a lot of history around NBC's coverage of the sport. Guys are bringing in some big names. Michael Jordan's involved in some capacity here. Like, this is going to be interesting to watch as you guys take this over. And obviously, you know, with the turnover and TNT losing the rights and all that, like, there's a lot of talk about the future of coverage in this league and just how this league's talked about in general. I don't know how much you guys are discussing, like, the way this coverage is going to look, the kind of style you want to have on the air, and just what NBC's brand is going to be now as they restart this thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, everybody's, first of all, what I'm looking forward to is hearing round ball rock again. That's the first thing. All of this, you know, that's still going to feel, it's going to hit. That's still going to hit big time the first time we get it for a real game. You know, we've got a great team. I think let's start there, where for me, I get to work with everybody. You know, we're going to rotate. There's no set broadcast team, so to speak. So I get to be with,
who's going to be calling games with you, the mix?
It's going to be Reggie Miller. It's going to be Jamal Crawford. It'll be Grant Hill. It'll be Austin Rivers. It'll be Robbie Hummel. You know, it's 5 different guys just right there. And then there's some others. And, you know, we've got Scal that's going to be a part of our coverage as well.
I'm sure you'll get him in for a Celtics game.
Oh, yeah. Come on. We're going to make that happen. But, you know, I think that's where I'm excited first. Then our studio team, you know, Carmelo Anthony, this is the first time he's going to be really doing television, and I think has a chance to be pretty interesting and different. You know, he's a unique guy, and he's got unique viewpoints and
his Hall of Fame speech was awesome, by the way.
Right. And I think he completely wrote that by himself, and the only person that saw it before he actually delivered it was the teleprompter person. That's it. So if that's any indication of what he's going to be on TV, I think he's going to be great. And then we've got Vince Carter, who's just he's my favorite player growing up. And he's as awesome a human being as they come. He's just always excited to be there. And his cousin, Tracy McGrady, who's proven that he's willing to say some stuff. So I think that in itself is going to be a lot of fun. But our coverage is going to be a blend. You know, I think everybody is saying, oh, are you going to tap into the nostalgia? Yeah, I think so. To a certain degree, there's going to be that. And then at the same time, we want to cover the league for what it is. We want to make sure we're highlighting the teams for what they are and highlighting the stories of the players, and finding the stuff that doesn't get told maybe as much as it deserves to be told. The stories of a guy who's a 12th guy on a team and has this incredible journey of getting to the NBA, or finding the diamonds in the rough, or the coaches, not just the head coaches, the assistant coaches. You know, that's always, I think, NBC's ethos of all the sports they cover, whether it's Sunday Night Football, for us, Big Ten football, Notre Dame football, the Olympics, golf, college basketball. Go down the list of all the properties that we have now, and it's all the same. I think the coverage is very similar across all of them. So I think it's going to be the same for the NBA, and we're going to make sure that we're highlighting the league and putting it in a very positive light. And so we're just excited to be a part of it, because, you know, the NBA, I think everybody's got their opinions. My opinion is that it's in as great a spot as it's been because of the parity, because of the talent level. The games are super exciting to me because the greatest play that we've ever seen in an NBA game can happen at any moment, because these guys are so skilled and so athletic and just different than what we've seen before. You've never had a guy like Victor Wembanyama. You know, the funny thing is, obviously, every era of basketball players feels a certain way. So I did say that to Chris Mullen, And he was like, well, I don't know. Ralph Sampson was pretty special. And he's right. Like, we forget that these guys of the past were incredible. But to see Wemby, you know, between the legs, behind the back, step back three, nylon is crazy.
I hope, man. I hope he's healthy, man, because I saw him in Boston, and
No, it's
it wasn't a
different.
yeah, and no, it wasn't a typical Wemby game that night. And, you know, it was good. I'm sure the stats, you know, sheet was up to par. But you come out of the game that, you know, I think the Celtics blew them out, and it was like, oh, it didn't really look like Wemby. I remember coming out of the game saying that, and then 2 days later, you got the blood clot news, and he's done for the year. So that was devastating last year. That was probably, you know, my least favorite moment of last season was seeing him go down and having his future put in a doubt there. So I'm interested to see how he comes back here. It seems like he's been cleared, but yeah, that's one of the big storylines I'm following into this year is what they're going to do. They have a great team. He's probably going to take a leap to some degree here. And for you, when you look across the league, what's going to be your favorite player to watch, storyline to watch this year as you kind of bounce around?
Yeah, I just think it's who's going to challenge Oklahoma City. You know, Oklahoma
Mhm.
City, youngest team in the league last year, and gets it done. Can they come back and do it again? They return essentially the same team and same coaching staff and top to bottom, same organization, right? But Denver got a lot better. And Denver is a team that easily could have beat them last year. They were 2 bounces away essentially from winning that series. And
Gordon
if they win,
injury too. Yeah.
well, the Gordon injury, Michael Porter Jr. is playing on one shoulder and was not
Mhm.
playing all that well. Jamal Murray is never really 100%, but he certainly wasn't in that series. And Nikola Jokic still almost single-handedly beat what was a team that everyone's looking at as a potential dynasty moving forward. He's that good. Like, I think we all know how good he is. And they got exponentially better this offseason. Cam
Can I
Johnson.
throw Houston in too?
You can absolutely. Well, that's my point is when I go down the Western Conference, I start listing all these teams in the Western Conference. It's, you say Oklahoma City, obviously. Denver, to me, is just as good, if not better, you know, with Bruce Brown back, with Tim Hardaway Jr. in there, with Valanciunas coming off the bench now. They're loaded. I mean, absolutely loaded. And you're now going to have a full offseason for Adelman to really get his grip around the team. Houston is loaded. I mean, Amen Thompson got a lot of love last year, but probably not enough. He is so good. And I think Alperen Sengun somehow is the most underrated player in the league right now. He's even
I don't
better
think many
than,
people saw what he did in Eurobasket, and they ended up losing the final. But
he is absurdly good. Absurd.
unreal.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up
Now
the
you
stat
add-
sheet right now.
Yeah, but now you add Durant to a team that still has veterans that can go make it happen. Van Vliet, you get Brooks is out of there. They can really focus on the guys that they've recognized are their pieces now moving forward. And this is a team with elite, as Boston fans know, an elite head coach. That is
I'm
going to
a big
be
Ime guy.
He's an elite head coach. That's going to be very much in the mix. But then, like, I go down the list in the Western Conference. You know, the Clippers have a lot going on right now, but let's just look at them on paper and their depth chart. Like, look at that on paper just for a second. They've got.
I want to
Kawhi
wait
Leonard.
and see what happens with all this aspiration stuff first.
Listen, just my thought, and obviously I don't know anything, but my expectation is nothing's going to happen with the product on the floor for them. You know, maybe they're going to have draft picks forfeited and a fine, but I don't think it'll be much more than that. I think Kawhi will be more than okay to play, but even if he doesn't, they're not going to play him for more than 45, 50 games anyway. And we saw that James Harden can shoulder a load in the regular season. Their problem was they get to the postseason and Harden runs out of gas, as we've seen through his career. But now you add more pieces, and I think that the piece that nobody's talking about for them that they added was John Collins, because one of their biggest issues was a lack of youth and athleticism. You know, Norman Powell ends up getting hurt, but even he's not young anymore. He's at the wrong end of 30. And you had Collins, so he's this kind of run up and down the floor guy. You bring in Brook Lopez as a backup big to what I think Ivica Zubac has turned into easily a top 5 center in the NBA. Look at his numbers from last year. He was a monster. And you can make the argument that he's a top 3 rim protector in the NBA. They had the best defense in the league for most of the season because Chris Dunn is arguably the best on-ball defender in the NBA at this stage of his career. He doesn't do anything else necessarily for them, but he stops your best player on the other end. they have a chance to be a suffocating defense again this year. And Jeff Van Gundy, Celtics fans know how important he can be on a coaching staff, or he wasn't even fully on the bench, but man, he was huge for them on the title run. He led the defense last year for the Clippers. They were nasty, and they got better. Now, their roster might need AARP cards, but and they're available for them. Man, they have a chance to be fun.
They were really good last year.
Yeah, but we talked about Lakers, Mavericks, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been in back-to-back Western Conference Finals, and Anthony Edwards is one of the top 3 to 4 to 5 best players in the NBA. Chris Finch is an outstanding head coach. Haven't talked about the San Antonio Spurs with Wembanyama if he's healthy, and now Harper, and now full season with Fox, and a Rookie of the Year in Castle. And I mean,
the Warriors went 23-7 with Butler.
Correct. Like, if they're healthy, and I mean, Steph is still very much Steph Curry, and Butler, when he's locked in, is a menace. So, I mean, that's my point, is to answer.
Who's not going to be good in the West next year?
Exactly.
Like, it's crazy. And I mentioned the Şengün stats from this Eurobasket run: 21 a game.
I think most people, things work out that way, but man, that Western Conference is gonna be a bloodbath. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's unreal. And I mentioned the Şengün stats: 21, 10, 6 in this Eurobasket tournament. I had so much fun watching this thing too. Kate was in it. Great competition. There was some beef between Şengün and Giannis at the end. Like, this whole tournament run, and of course Schroeder and Tice end up winning it with the championship at the end.
By the way, my favorite thing with Giannis, everybody saw. Then you probably saw on Twitter if you didn't watch it or weren't following. But Şengün essentially said that he's this all-time great player that can't pass, and then Giannis was like, I don't talk. I let my game do the talking. When we literally have video of him talking trash constantly on the court in the NBA. He did
the fake handshake to Jaylen last year.
Correct. I love Giannis because he can get away with it because he's like warm and fuzzy about how he does everything. So everybody's just like, well, it's Giannis, it's Giannis. No. Like, Giannis talks trash all the time, which I love. Like, he should. He's one of the greatest players in the history of the game. He should be allowed to talk trash.
So that's the last storyline I'll ask you about this year, because there was a lot of noise around him this summer. Is he going to stay in Milwaukee? The roster turned over. They released Lillard, Brown, Turner. I don't love the roster around him. There's a few interesting guys, but he's going to be carrying some heavy weight this year. And I guess that's my first prediction of this offseason going into next year is I think he's going to stay for this season at least. And I don't know how good they're going to be, but I think he's going to have to carry so much weight there, and he's capable of it, that he's going to end up winning MVP this year.
Ooh. That would be tough because I don't expect them to win enough games for him to win MVP.
He was what, 3rd or 4th last year? He was right up there.
Yeah, but that was a 2-man race. Yeah,
yep.
You could say he's 4th or whatever he was, even if he was 3rd. That was a 2-man race, man. Like, nobody else was even coming close to those two guys. And that's my concern. That Oklahoma City's still going to be so good. Denver's still going to be so good that how could Giannis, if Giannis even wins 48 games, which would be a huge deal, or let's say they even win 50 games, which would be a huge deal. Oklahoma City won 65 last year. And that was the difference with SGA and Jokic last year. It was what, 17 or 15 more wins, something like that. That's a huge deal. It's a huge difference for a lot of voters. And that's my concern of him winning MVP. But I'm looking at their roster now. I mean, Porter, Trent, Kuzma, Giannis, Turner, Gary Harris, AJ Green, Portis, Prince.
They got Cole Anthony
now. Like, I don't know. It's not enough. It's not enough. Now, as we talked about, the East is open, but it's not enough. They did re-sign Thanasis, so that's great.
Yeah, and that's where the question's going to rise. Is he going to stick it out there for his career or even this year? I don't imagine they'd be trading Giannis at the deadline, but if things go sideways to a massive degree, who knows? He'll be another storyline to track.
After Luka last year, nothing is off the table.
Absolutely. And I think Houston's in a good spot to make a big offer. Trying to think who else. Be a number of teams. Everyone will be interested, obviously, to some degree. So we will follow along with that.
But just before we wrap up, do you think that would be smart for Houston to do?
I mean, they didn't want to get in on Butler last year, and it probably led to them losing that first round series. But long term, it's looking like a good move for them.
No, and the reason I say it is you already made your big swing for Durant. Like, to me,
Yep.
that's your swing, and now you got to ride it out, because I think if you give up any more of what you already have, then you're kind of surrendering what you built your team on, which is like this tough, athletic young guys, along with Şengün as your centerpiece.
I mean, if you asked me a couple of months ago, would I have traded Şengün for Giannis? I would have said yes. Now, I don't know.
No, I would have said no last year, because at some point, Giannis's play style is not one, to me, that's going to age gracefully.
Yeah,
he probably has. Let's say, how many more years does he have? 3 to 4 more years. To me, you're shrinking your window if you're Houston. You have a chance with Şengün, and this is why I'm saying he's the most underrated player in the league. I think that the Rockets now have a chance with Şengün, because people forget how young he was when he was a rookie. I'll never forget. We played when I was with the Clippers. We played in Houston. It was one of those 2-game miniseries. First game, Şengün has the Clippers win the game by 20, but Şengün has like 24 and 9 or something like that. And we go back to the hotel after the game, and we're in the lobby restaurant area just getting food. And Tyronn Lue walks in with a bunch of the other assistants and just comes over, says what's up. And I was like, man, how about that center, huh? He's like, yeah, that guy's pretty good. I'm like, can you believe can you believe that he turned 18 like 2 weeks ago or something like that, or whatever it was at the time? And he goes, what'd you just say to me? I go, can you believe that he just turned 18? He's like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, that's not good. That's really bad news. And so he kind of walked away, and then we played him again 2 days. He's like, you were just messing with me about his age, right? I'm like, no, man, like, he's that young. And he said, that guy's going to be a problem, like a problem. And sure enough, here he is. And so that's why I wouldn't do it if I'm Houston at this point. I think your window is actually larger than most teams, because he's going to be that good for you for a long time. You can't abandon it.
Do you know whose first round pick Houston used to draft him?
What year was this?
2020, I believe. 2021.
No, whose was it?
The Boston Celtics.
Oh, man. From what trade?
The Celtics traded it with Kemba to the Thunder, who sent back Horford. And then the Thunder ended up trading it on draft night to Houston, which is probably a bigger Thunder regret.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, to be fair, it was worth it to get Horford back, and you win a title, so it all works out the right way.
Me and my co-host John have debated that one for a while. He really wishes they took Şengün there, but Horford coming back was a big deal. 2 finals trips.
Yeah, they needed Horford back. You can't trade that. As much as you would love to have Şengün right now, you can't trade what Horford brought to the table over the last 4 years since then. So yeah,
and getting off Kemba at that point was important too, unfortunately. So yes. Kemba's still coaching in Charlotte again this year, I believe. I'm happy for that. I got to run into him last year, and he wasn't thrilled about coaching. You know, I think he would rather been playing, but I think he's getting more comfortable in that role out there, and we'll see what they're able to do. Great talking to you, Noah. Always a blast. Excited for what you're doing. Looking forward to listening you call some of these games this year. I'll ask you this before we wrap. Syracuse basketball. What are we expecting from them? Kai and Anthony, bunch of talent coming in. I need a great season, man. Of course, Noah and I went to Syracuse for a couple of years. Wasn't the best basketball when we were there, and it hasn't gone a great direction since either. But this is the year, I think.
Yeah, I got a Final Four run my freshman year. You just missed that.
Yep.
Which was a surprise run as a 10 seed, and then we got a Sweet 16 run. But
with O'Shea Brissett, who went on to win the title with the Celtics, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, correct. He played great in that tournament too. I don't know. I really wish I had a better answer for you, but I think I'm excited to see what they look like. They bring back enough talent with Starling and Freeman. They bring in talent. The Georgia Tech transfer is supposed to be a good point guard for them, and Cayenne is going to bring some juice. So
it's going to be fun.
You can deliver, man.
Melo's going to be at a lot of games. I'm going to be at a lot of games, I hope. I hope I can make that drive for a handful this year. So looking forward to that in November. Celtics camp starts in 2 weeks. We'll have all the coverage here on CLNS Media. So subscribe, and looking forward to watching Noah on NBC. What's your first game going to be? Do you know yet?
First regular season game, Lakers Warriors opening night.
Wow, that's a big one. That's going to be big ratings too. Warriors and Lakers still attract that kind of audience. How many LeBron Curry games are left? We don't even know.
That's
so
the
everyone's
point.
going to be a big deal.
Guaranteed one right off the rip, which will be fun.
All right. Thanks for stopping by, Noah. And thanks to everybody for tuning in live. Again, shout out to Prize Picks and Game Time. Show them some love to support CLNS here and the Garden Report. And of course, subscribe to CLNS Media and Celtics All Access. We will see you later in the week for another show. And thanks again for Noah stopping by. Great to have you here, man. And looking forward to talking to you throughout the year.
You got it.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to
Shane,
feel that
Shane,
way.
Shane.
Let's slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke